The IBX Interborough Express is being designed as a light metro line utilizing freight train right-of-way between Brooklyn and Queens in New York City, connecting many subway lines and communities with frequent rail service. While much of the rail corridor is surrounded by vibrant communities, the areas immediately at the planned Utica Avenue stop are industrial, not destinations for masses of people. With public transportation able to bring a lot more people to an area with minimal additional strain on traffic, this will be a sought-out location for redevelopment into mixed-use buildings, which will require zoning changes. Hi, I'm Apu, an aspiring real estate developer investor in Brooklyn, New York City. While my main focus area is Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, and Crown Heights, today I will be talking about a nearby transportation infrastructure project and the potential for development that would require zoning changes. My experience being on the Housing and Land Use Committee and the full Brooklyn Community Board 3 makes me knowledgeable about the zoning change process and implications. However, I cannot speak on behalf of the board. Also, while many residents of my district will use the IBX daily or frequently via its connection points at nearby Atlantic Avenue Broadway Junction and Metropolitan Avenue Middle Village, the board does not come to formal resolutions on projects entirely outside of our district. I am also familiar with the area around the Utica Avenue IBX stop from my previous work in solar panel sales. The information I am talking about in this video will directly impact Brooklyn Community Boards 17 and 18, and I hope this gives them some things to think about. The IBX right-of-way is almost entirely above ground, making it much cheaper and faster to build than other expansion projects, factors that inspire optimism that the project will be actually completed in less than 6 to 10 years from now. With the backing of Governor Kathy Hochul, in August 2025, the project began the design phase. Challenges to completing the train line without the need to transfer through Manhattan, any adjacent and nearby developments, include the need to maintain increased freight rail service. The line will connect almost every train line that serves Brooklyn and Queens, and some communities, including the area around Utica Avenue, that currently do not have subway service, and will serve as an outer crosstown line, a partial circle line. Utica Avenue is a major street in Brooklyn, New York City, beginning in Bed-Stuy at the intersection of Fulton Street with the AC subway station, Boys and Girls High School, and Smurf Village, which is slated for further development in an unrelated endeavor, and goes all the way south to Flatbush Avenue in Flatlands, Brooklyn. For most of the avenue, there are two traffic lanes, one reserved for buses, served by the B46 and B46 Select buses, one of the busiest in all of New York City, and there is parking on both sides of the street.
See, there's a bus lane. As you can see, it's parking lane, bus lane, traffic lane, bus lane, and as you can see, there's the bus stop. This is the B46 Select. It's very frequent.
The IBX corridor intersects Utica Avenue between Farragut and Glenwood Roads near Kings Highway. The IRT Eastern Parkway line, currently served by the 3 and 4 trains, Utica Avenue stop, is 3.5 kilometers from the IBX Utica Avenue stop, although proposals to branch down Utica Avenue exist, likely under a different service pattern. The most recent MTA 20-year needs assessment includes this, and they are provisional spaces. The bell mouths east of the local platforms at Eastern Parkway are most likely to be used. The AC train Fulton Street platforms are lowered down, with space above sealed off for platforms is much less likely to be used, as that was envisioned with an entirely new subway line from Manhattan. Due to water table and future flooding issues, at some point along the line it will need to come above ground. Transportation blogger Van Hoekenschergen, VANSHHENKENSCHERGEN, Ookenraggen. I'm sure I butchered that. My apologies. He has published many well-researched transportation proposals for New York City and elsewhere. He places this portal somewhere a little north of Kings Highway, so that's right near the station, and that ought to be considered in station design or in any zoning changes on Utica Avenue north of the station that I'll discuss. In this photo, I took, for example, of such an under to above ground portal, the LIRR on Atlantic Avenue between Bedford Avenue and Nostrand Avenue. Even with this portal, Atlantic Avenue still has 3 lanes of traffic in each direction, whereas Utica Avenue is much more narrow. Such a portal would bottleneck bus, car, and truck traffic. In place of that, such provision Public transportation typically connects passengers in one of 2 different ways. Within major cities, like New York, bringing people directly to their destination is preferred. Transit-oriented development is when areas are enhanced for that purpose because of the public transportation. In suburbs, park and rides are more popular, which bring people to their cars that they have to use to get to their destination. However, the IBX corridor has neither at Utica Avenue. It largely services cars without people, meaning when cars break down, they are sent to a mechanic or scrapyard.
And it mostly is not things for people that ride buses. This is for cars.
There are other industrial uses, like supermarket distribution centers and self-storage facilities. Currently, in the neighborhoods around the IBX Utica Avenue stop, people don't really need cars, but with there only being bus service, which can be unreliable in the late nights, many opt to have cars. In much of the residential areas, houses are built with some parking. With the City of Yes laws, parking requirements on new buildings have been loosened, and areas designated as having good public transportation generally have those requirements waived. With the IBX making the connection to other trains that are only a few kilometers away, a park and ride model for the Utica Avenue stop would not be the right decision. This photo I took is of the D train at a stop the IBX will serve. Under federal law, all new transportation stations must be accessible to people with wheelchairs and other mobility challenges. Somewhere between this law, advocacy, and lawsuits, all connections that the IBX enables must also be made accessible. Accessibility is already present or planned at many of the transfer points. In this picture I took on August 29th of last year, the elevator for the Queens-bound platform at the A train Utica Avenue station was out of service. The next station with an elevator is a 10-minute express ride, longer if only local service, was out of service for replacement. This problem plagues the system because almost all accessible stations only have one elevator per platform and one elevator to exit to the street level. The subway system operates 24 hours a day every day of the year, but elevators literally cannot do that due to maintenance and not so eventual replacements. So it is high time that elevator redundancy be pushed for. New Yorkers deserve to have access to their accessibility haven of a new train line at all times that it is open. Communication about elevator outages is very important for rider confidence that if they enter the subway system, they will be able to transfer and exit where intended. Up-to-the-minute announcements and display screens on board and in stations can help riders plan. With the IBX connecting so many riders, those making transfers throughout the city can utilize the line to get to where one of the elevators is. For example, Brooklyn riders on the F train going to Howard Square should be given information if they need to transfer via the IBX to the Q line, which also serves Herald Square, or the 2 train that serves Penn Station 1 block away. The Brighton Line Q train is at Avenue H, and that station has ramps which are more reliable than elevators. A corridor of ADA accessibility transit is a haven for increased quality of life. Private and public development nearby the stations ought to have this in mind beyond the minimum requirements. It also is important for seniors and those with medical issues to have facilities that cater to those needs. Families in this community will appreciate being able to live nearby while maintaining independence when possible. Much of the freight rail corridor, especially near Utica Avenue, is Zone M1-1 for light industries. For environmental and traffic concerns, it is important for New York City to support this freight rail line. However, M1-1 does not allow for what I call people destinations. Live, work, and play is the more common term. Zero housing is allowed. Trade schools are allowed, but no other educational centers. And there is no park adjacent to the line. Housing in the area is mostly 5 to 10-minute walk. The M1-1 light manufacturing zone hugs both sides of the rail line from Albany Avenue, which is half a mile, 800 meters, 10-minute walk west of Utica Avenue to several kilometers east. Interest will be extremely high for changing the zoning from Albany Avenue to Utica Avenue to mixed use, as these locations will now be within walking distance of a train. Of course, the same holds true for areas east of the station within walking distance, but it is hard to know where interest will taper off because there is no planned station until Remsen Avenue, which is for Brownsville. The M1-1 corridor widens in that direction, so there is much less nearby housing currently. West of Albany Avenue, high-density residential is currently present, and Brooklyn College is within walking distance, which is an existing subway terminus. Since it is much easier to have provisions for future stations on a light rail than a subway, if development is viable, adding a station later on can be considered. Along with industrial uses like loading docks, there is a mall parking lot hugging the corridor and a development before the corner. In under a 5-minute walk, there is self-storage, laundromat, fast food shopping, and some housing. Since a train can bring more people to an area without extra traffic strains, the space along the IBX corridor and Utica Avenue will become prime real estate for redevelopment in a city that needs more of such place. Some land plots, especially along the IBX corridor, are tucked away enough that the structures themselves won't pose community character changes, and the structures along Utica Avenue can be kept to heights that won't produce excess shadowing that can impact quality of life by decreasing sunlight hours, which is happening on the Lefferts Place in Bed-Stuy, north of Atlantic Avenue, as a result of previous rezonings now encompassed in the AAMUP area. Along Utica Avenue, within a 10-minute walk of the station, outside of the M1-1 corridor, so north of Foster Avenue and south of Avenue H, are zoned commercial. C8-1 is, quote, heavy commercial services like auto repair shops and construction supplies, and C1-2, which is a commercial overlay of residential, meant for things like corner stores. Both allow event spaces of some types. Outside the 5-minute radius of the IBX station and off of Utica Avenue, but within the 10-minute walking radius, is mostly close or semi-attached houses under 25 feet, 7.5 meters, tall R4 with some slightly more dense R5 and R3-2 housing. The residential area is fully developed, but added demand might encourage people to maximize value within what zoning allows. Atlantic Avenue is a major truck route in Brooklyn and has a comparable M-1 use. Initially envisioned as M Crown by Community Board 8, which represents Crown Heights, the Atlantic Avenue Mixed-Use Plan AMUP was recently passed as a way to spur development on Atlantic Avenue and blocks to the south. The AAMUP area is primarily between Vanderbilt and Nostrand Avenues. This zoning changes allows mixed-use residential development to build, quote, as of right, instead of developers having to go through the community input and city council zoning change process for each project they want to do. Of course, to build these mixed-use buildings currently in place will need to be torn down, temporarily displacing the industrial uses. In the next few years, we will see how effective getting all of this done is, which ought to be informative in making decisions about the IBX corridor. To much frustration, buildings currently completed in the area pre-AAMUP are high-end luxury residential. The formula that determines the quote rent of quote affordable housing allocation required to get certain tax benefits does not make sense for the area. I will focus on the likely proposals within a 10-minute walking distance of the IBX Utica Avenue stop, with particular focus on the area less than a 5-minute walk of the station and along Utica Avenue from Avenue D to Avenue I. Of course, heightened development might go beyond that as people walk a little further than that and B46 buses provide frequent service. And with the Eastern Parkway Utica Avenue stop just over 2 miles away, almost any given point on Utica Avenue won't be much further away than a mile from a train station. During a walkthrough, I have noted that the most common land uses within a 10-minute walk distance of the proposed Utica Avenue Interborough Express IBX stop are industrial manufacturing, including transferring goods from freight rail to trucks for delivery, self-storage, car repair, shopping including stores and fast food, R4 zone housing, which are buildings up to approximately 25 feet tall, 7.5 meters close together. Event spaces including clubs, catering halls, churches and funeral homes, and outpatient medical offices and facilities. All of these uses are worth enhancing in this transit-oriented development planning.
But as you can see, the elevated structure down there, that's the proposed line. And this is an event space, funeral services, which I'd say is an event space. So those are the dominant uses that we're seeing. So those are the dominant land uses that we're seeing in this along Utica Avenue in that 10-minute range, or really along Utica Avenue in general. We've seen automotive, manufacturing, healthcare, and event spaces. Event spaces being event spaces, funeral homes, churches. And now on this, so we're now on Foster and East 51st Street. And if you look on that side of the street, that goes closer to the line, and actually, since the line sort of turns at an angle, you're actually a little bit closer to where the tracks are. So that is why now you're getting more manufacturing use along Foster at this point.
Mid-rise, 14 to 25-story mixed-use buildings are likely to be what entices investors, especially those looking for government funds to create truly low-income housing. And continuing to support the use of freight rail is vital to supporting city infrastructure needs. This means any new building should have to be required to have light industrial uses on lower levels, and housing can be on the levels above. Since the corridor is tucked away and there are less homes within a 2-minute walk, the impact of tall buildings on community residents and character is lowered. Tension between residents and developer interests could be huge if taller buildings along Utica Avenue in the 5 to 10-minute range of the station are proposed. This area is currently C1-2 commercial overlay on residential, with purely residential in the back streets. Shadow, sunlight, and community character issues will be raised, especially if buildings are for incomes and rents higher than what most residents can afford. Enhancing event spaces the community can better use, along with hotels, will be great uses so that residents can have friends and family visit. Perhaps the 50 relatives coming for a wedding can have more nice venues and after parties and some place to stay. Mixed use apartment buildings that aren't too tall, perhaps 4 to 6 floor apartment buildings with ground floor commercial, typical along commercial blocks in Bed-Stuy, could also be of good use. Earlier this year, a developer claimed that they needed 14 floors to convince the federal government it would be an efficient use of space to fund their housing for low income. If this is true, stakeholders need to come to the table and come up with alternatives. Provisions for a portal for the Utica Avenue subway would be having a block where zoning isn't adjusted to enhance building or requiring a setback far enough that a street widening could be achieved. The last hurricane-prompted warning that triggered evacuations in New York City was in 2012. A cold front was not enough to prevent Superstorm Sandy from causing great damage that the city is still recovering from and substantial loss of life from people who didn't heed evacuation orders because the storm the year prior didn't cause extreme damage to New York City. In 2021, after making landfall in the Gulf of Mexico, weakening and falling apart for thousands of miles, Ida caused fast, heavy rains, trapping people in basement apartments, causing dozens of deaths. New York City is now climate classified as humid subtropical, so building designs should consider flooding when placing mechanicals and critical supplies. New York City emergency planning now calls for hurricane evacuations to be announced by zone, so it is possible that some, but not all, of the small area discussed in this video would need to be evacuated if, while on a long enough timescale, when a strong enough storm takes aim at the city. To make sure development of the area is done in a way that makes sense, all stakeholders must come to the table. That is, developers, residents, the MTA Metropolitan Transit Authority, accessibility advocates, various city planning boards, the New York City Housing Authority, federal officials, and I'm sure there's more. Brooklyn Community Board 17 covers the area north of the station, with CB 18 covering the south. Very little of what I've described can be built without changing the law, the zoning I've described throughout. So, if the community is being stuck with something that doesn't provide benefit or relies on a not useful formula, they should push for postponing the development until something better is figured out. I would be remiss if I were to make an entire video about the IBX without giving my thoughts on the long-standing previously proposed extension to Astoria for LaGuardia Airport and the Bronx by the Regional Planning Association. The MTA decided against this because, as proposed, it would have used the same tracks that Penn Access project for Metro North will use. However, it has since been decided that the IBX will be light metro, which by regulation cannot share the same tracks at the same time as freight and heavy passenger rail. Therefore, as a phase 2 for the IBX, double stacking the viaduct should be considered to bring the light metro to Astoria and the Bronx, along with extending the Astoria elevated subway line connection to LaGuardia Airport. The Astoria Ditmar stop is situated such that Amtrak and Metro North could stop there as well. The subway to LaGuardia Airport has not been built due to community opposition, but quieter trains and elegant design may help to ease concerns. In this photo I took is the LaGuardia Link bus. It is likely that an additional stop will be added at the IBX Roosevelt Avenue stop. Adding a mass transit line allows more people to work, live, and play in a given area with minimized strain to traffic. Land for development is hard to come by in New York City, especially areas that are catered for multifamily housing. The best use of space at transit stops is destinations that actually meet community needs.
Right here. Right here. See, I can zoom out. Right, yeah. Stairs there. Bus stop. There. They haven't released any final designs or made any final designs, but that. And you see that smokestack or whatever that stack is, that's pretty much up against the station. And this is more to the east, right? This is the less than 5-minute range to the east, and that's the 5 to 10-minute range to the east.
All new transportation infrastructure in the United States, per ADA accessibility law, must be accessible to people with disabilities. So the IBX stations will be an accessibility haven like nothing the city has ever seen. However, the MTA is in the habit of building one elevator per platform with only a singular elevator for street access. It is simply impossible to make an elevator operational 24/7, 365. Elevators need downtime for maintenance and not so eventual replacement. It is high time to use all advocacy and legal options to force the MTA to add backup elevators to this line and the transfers it enables. Light rail lines tend to use single track operation during track maintenance, meaning a strategy of repairing elevators while stations are closed is not an option. If constructed, the Utica Avenue subway would branch off of the Eastern Parkway line. However, due to ground conditions, the subway must emerge to become elevated within the walking catchment area of the IBX. Therefore, plans should leave space for brief street widening. The IBX will transfer to almost every train line in Brooklyn and Queens, along with the NYC ferry system, and serve some locations currently without train service. The IBX will save people time by not having to go all the way to Manhattan to transfer, but will add a transfer to those trips. Every transfer eats up waiting time, so frequent service, even during late nights, is very important for making sure the line actually saves people time. Best in Pursuits. This was Abu.